States, like your bar mitzvah, your wedding, and the birth of your first child in one second, in the same, and that's what I felt. So when I came to the press, which is like after when we came to the press after like signings, and there's a first call to your mother. There's a new station that they do, like you call your mother, and my mother was in PJs at 4 a.m. And so I was overwhelmed when I saw you and you spoke to me in Hebrew. It was such a relief, because it's like your homie, your guy, from your gang. So it was such a good thing for you to talk to me in Hebrew and for the first time. So it I was so intense, it was so intense, but I felt in ease, like when I saw you.
You can find that moment on YouTube where it will live in infamy. So not only did you have a 5-month-old, now a 13-month-old, you now have two additional members of the family, two Oscars. That was
The
quite a year.
twins,
The twins.
Alma's younger brothers,
Do you have names for them?
Oscar 1 and Oscar 2.
Where do you keep them?
They're actually on our nightstands. I have one mine is on my side and his is on his side. So
His and hers.
So we can wake up in the morning when truly we still wake up and like, did that really happen? And then you kind of look over and there it is. There they are.
So that was I would just say a life-changing year this past year for you guys.
It took us almost a decade to make Skin the feature. Which we'll talk about in a second. And we only made Skin the short because no one would make Skin the feature. It took us 6 years to have a baby. We had a very, very long, hard road to get to Alma. And they all happened at the same exact time. Like 2018-19, our entire lives changed. And I think often about, the very dark moments that we had leading up to that. And just the absolute certainty, looking into each other's eyes, we were going to make Skin and we will have a baby. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it will happen. And I think it's just a testament. It's kind of like the Jewish spirit, you just figure out a way day after day after day to create your art and create your child.
You mentioned the feature, the full-length feature. We saw the short. They're both named Skin, but it's not the same movie. If you can tell us about the full-length movie before we delve into the short.
So in 2012, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Tel Aviv, in Sderot Yehudit, and I was in a long-distance relationship with this wonderful woman who was
How did you meet?
my agent that was not Jaded, but it's before Jaded. My agent that William Morris dated her sister, and 1 second before they broke up, he told me there's an amazing Jewish lady who's coming to Israel to visit her family. Why don't you meet? And we met on her way to the airport when she was with her luggage. She went to a coffee shop, and guess what? She didn't take the plane.
Aww.
Yeah, that's the cliche of first sight. But so I was sitting in a coffee shop in Tel Aviv. We were in a long distance relationship. I knew that I'm about to move to the States, but so I was looking for my a topic that will speak to me, that will make me feel that I want to really do it. And I saw this article in the Haaretz paper when you saw kind of this neo-Nazi skinhead named Brian Widener. His entire face and body was tattooed, and slowly you saw this kind of a montage of him becoming a normal person. He took all of his tattoos off through friendship with African-American activist and love story with him and Julie and her girls. And I called my grandfather, who's a Holocaust survivor, and I told him about this story. And he taught us about tolerance. He taught us about accepting the new generation. And he gave me the green light to do that. He said, it's very important for you to do that because it's such an important story. And then I sent it to Jamie, and Jamie said it's phenomenal. And, through MSNBC, who did this documentary, Raising Hate, about him, a great documentary, we got his contacts, like his email address, and I wrote him an email about my, yeah, they live in witness protection of the FBI, and you can have that. You can always interrupt me if you want.
Like a good Jewish wife.
And we got his email. I wrote him an email about myself, why a Jewish Israeli filmmaker should tell his story. And after 2 months, he wrote us back and said, let's Skype. We did Skype session with him and his wife, and after that he said, okay, now, if you're really serious, come to Albuquerque, New Mexico to visit me, and let's talk. So I flew from Tel Aviv, Jamie flew from the States, and we met him in a basically in a Breaking Bad scenario in a small coffee shop, and they circled the coffee shop 7 times to see that we're not like a hitman or something like that. Do you want to take it from here?
Well, we were certainly the first Jews that he had ever met. They were obviously the first ex-skinhead neo-Nazis that we had ever met. And what ended up happening is we, the 4 of us, saw human beings in front of each other. And it turned out to be, a life-changing weekend. And at the end, they signed their life rights on a napkin for us, to us. And this launched us into 4 years of Guy writing this screenplay. We came back to New Mexico many times to sit and write with Brian, to get very intimate details of his life. We ended up becoming, truly they're 2 of our closest, dearest friends at this point. And our agents took the final script out in the summer of 2016. We took it out to 50, 60 producers. We got amazing feedback on the script. Every producer said, we love the script, we love Guy's previous work in Israel. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton is about to become president, so racism kind of isn't a thing right now.
We fixed it.
It's not really in the zeitgeist anymore. We've just had 8 years of a black president. This is like 5 people in the Midwest. And Guy and I had spent, since 2012, deep diving into these communities, and we were like, wait a second, no, this really does exist. And so
I was more angry than that.
yeah.
I said, what do you know? It was crazy how producers in Hollywood and in New York are living in a bubble back then, and they didn't even know what's going on in the backyard of America that became the front yard of America.
So with our tail between our legs, very deeply depressed, Guy's writing, well, actually, Guy has always, the 3 films that he did in Israel, he's always done a short as its predecessor. He was actually shortlisted for the Oscar. The very first short he made, called Strangers, he got to the top 10 but didn't get nominated. This is in 2002. So his writing partner in Israel came up, you've all seen the short now, so came up with this concept of
Sharon Maimon, great filmmaker.
Came up with this concept of a white guy tattooed black. And he pitched it to Guy. And Guy was like, oh my God, I think this could be the short film that I make as a proof of concept for the feature.
And I saw a news article about a skinhead neo-Nazi that taught his son how to shoot Mexicans in the border and brainwashed him. And one night the father came home drunk at 3 a.m. The son took the father's gun and shot him in the head because he thought he's an African-American intruder. So it all, came to be a script after writing it in a weekend.
Yeah, they literally, I said to him, oh my God, it's brilliant. Let's make it as a proof of concept to show producers. And of course, in the meantime, the administration changes, Charlottesville happens, the world kind of catches on fire. So we were like, how are we going to finance this thing? And I said to Guy, I think we should put all of our retirement money into this film, into this short. And we called our banker and we told him this idea, and he said, absolutely not, you're insane. And I said, you know what? Read the script. It's 20 pages. And he was like, I don't read scripts. And I said, just read it. And he called us Monday morning and he said, absolutely yes. You have to make this. You have my blessing.
He's still our banker.
Yeah. He's angry we didn't thank him from the podium.
So the story that we saw, the Jeffrey character story, is not the same story as in the feature full-length story.
No.
So if you could just tell a little bit about what the long
The long
is.
version?
Yeah.
Brian Widener, skinhead neo-Nazi, hardcore, full tattoos, meet Julie, woman, fall in love with her and her three little girls, and changing families from this hardcore family, fascist family that took him when he was 14, brainwashed him, and
Fed him, clothed him.
yeah, and he's basically diving and putting everything he has into the new family, trying to get rid of his tattoos, but it's not that easy. And he's developing this friendship with Daryl Lamont Jenkins, who is an African American activist who chased him all those years, but now with the FBI, tells him, "Let's make a deal. You basically decode your tattoos. Tell us what every tattoo means, and we're gonna grant you $90,000 to take them off of your body." And that's what happened throughout the film. And you see how this guy has, I don't want to call it redemption story because it's not a perfect redemption story, but it's a change of heart. And what we ask the audience, do you have a place in your heart and soul, not to forgive, but because we don't want anyone to forgive him, but to accept somebody who used to be a monster and wants to become a human being?
So definitely go watch Skin, the long version, starring Jamie Bell.
Jamie Bell, Danielle
A
McDonald.
lot of acclaim for his
From,
Vera
from Billy,
Farmiga.
Billy Elliot. Remember
yeah,
that?
the little kid that
movie?
dances. Yeah.
He's brilliant. You know, I think Hollywood Reporter said it's the best performance of his career. He gained 30 pounds, shaved his head, prosthetic nose and prosthetic teeth. He went through 4 hours of makeup every single morning.
Brian Widener, who flew and spent time on the set, said that he's more Brian Widener than he was. So it was hard for him even to watch and be there on set.
I'm curious to know if you have a different perspective tackling such a topical, important issue, is hate essentially, being an Israeli, being a Jewish American, the way you were raised and grew up. Did you have different perspective that you brought to the filmmaking?
I think it's easier for me as an Israeli, as a foreign filmmaker, to come to this subject matter in the U.S. and bring a different, perspective, because it's harder for American who's living here, and you got to be crazy in order to tackle such a subject right now. Because when they did the Vietnam movies, Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now, it was like 10 years after the Vietnam War, and I'm coming with this explosive, subject to the American, people who are very angry right now, and I'm saying to them, look, can you deal with it? And some say, no, we can't. We cannot even think about forgiving or accepting this guy. And some says yes. So it takes a foreign village, which is like Danielle McDonald is Australian, I'm Israeli, Jamie Bell is British, and our producers are foreign too. So to go and tell such a story right now, when it's still so crazy.
So I'll ask you what I asked you right after you won at the Oscars. Maybe you'll have a different answer in hindsight. When you won, it was a national celebration in Israel. Israel, unfortunately, has never won the best international film. Now it's called category. And whenever we have an Israeli, is unsere, one of us. Do you feel like a sense of representing the country and the entire Jewish people history on your back?
What I felt when I came, to visit Israel, and after this win, I felt that there's 1 second, one moment, and that's a reporter who told my mom at 5 a.m., we want to interview you. So my mom said, come on, I'm with my PJs. And he told her, listen, there's one moment that unite all the right and left and the Israelis, and are putting like so much joy.
It was in the middle of the election, right?
Yeah, before the election, and it's like, and it's a moment that unite us and bring us a little naches, a little joy. Why not? And I feel that in the case of the short, half of the short was made by Israelis. Yuval and Sharon, and we did the post production in Israel, and it's for me it's half Israeli, half American, and I'm Israeli filmmaker, so it's kind of like, why not?
And I know that you guys have your own production company, New Native, which is new men. Native is native. She's the native. He's new. Get it? Get it?
It's
A
brilliant.
little pun.
Um, and we know we've been hearing this past decade a lot of Naches. We mentioned Naches, a lot of TV formats, a lot of filmmakers, Gal Gadot, a lot of Israelis are around Hollywood. We'll call it. Is there a camaraderie? Is there a sense of I'll come to your screening. I'll help you finance this one.
Well, I think that everyone has his own route, but we do meet each other. I mean, Alona Tal is a good friend of ours, and she's a neighbor. Gal Gadot, we hang out with her, and it's such a small community in Hollywood that you do want to engage with cool Israelis that make cool art. So yeah, we are kind of like a little gang in LA, but it doesn't mean that we work together or you know, but we do help each other when needed.
How about the coveted invitation to Shabbat dinner at your house? I've heard a little bit about that.
Well, I was just saying how for when you moved to LA, because many times there's an Israeli film that's nominated for Best Foreign Film in the Golden Globes or the Oscars. So around January, February, we always have some Israeli, filmmaker. We're hosting them like wide-eyed, like, oh my God, I've never been to LA. Like, no, just come to our house. You'll have Shabbat with my mother. Will cook. It's okay. You're all right. You're amongst mishpacha.
Yeah, we had the Aya, the short film that was nominated for an Oscar, and we had Shmulik Maoz, who came,
Foxtrot.
and so
Shlomi Alkabetz.
Shlomi Elkabetz came to our,
Get
yeah.
So what interests you as filmmakers with your company, with future projects, topics that you want to explore? If you could, talk about something that you have in the works.
We have a slew of projects. I think the kind of common thread between, we have about like 10, 12 projects. The common thread between all of them is some sort of social, political relevance. We are not into just making escapism. I think there's room and a place for that, but that's not the MO of the art that we're interested in making. We're doing a film, the feature, Skin. Guy was just telling you guys about Daryl Lamont Jenkins, the black activist who spent 30 years not only outing these neo-Nazis, but also turning them into, redemptive human beings. So we're making a feature about him. We're working with Chadwick Boseman, who is just Black Panther.
Black Panther, yeah.
Yeah, he's producing it with us. We have a project with Keshet about the first stunt, Keshet International, about the first stunt woman in Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s. And I think the next project that we'll probably shoot in 2020, why don't you tell about Harmonia? A
Yeah.
script the guy wrote. While no one was making Skin, Guy wrote his next movie.
We also have a project before that. We also have a project, it's a great script that I didn't write, but our agent brought it to me, about the Challenger disaster, about the man who came to investigate what happened, and he exposed NASA against all odds. And he was the guy who basically, he was in this committee in the 80s. It's a fascinating film. So Harmonia, my next feature, is about my grandmother who used to be she used to be a Holocaust survivor in the 80s, and she had depression when she was 55. And we didn't know what to do with her. I mean, she really wanted to kill herself until her manicurist told her that there's a woman that she needs to meet that will change her life. And this woman was from Jerusalem. And just imagine Sophia Loren in her 40s, gorgeous.
Like a Penelope Cruz kind of.
Yeah. Belly dancer. And she came to my grandmother and she told her, listen, I'm going to make you happy. Just be with me. And, they did what people are, it's like the mainstream of today. It's like fasting and meditation,
Yoga.
yoga, know your body, and the whole thing. What we didn't know is that this woman is actually a cult leader. And she had like 37 women around her. So she made my grandmother divorce my grandfather, and she took all her reparation money from Germany. And my grandmother left us and moved to Jerusalem. And when the police started questioning how money disappeared from all these women, she took these women and brought them to Virginia. 5 hours from Charlottesville, in the middle of nowhere, in the forest. She bought this plantation with all the money of the women, and she lived like a queen. And my grandmother was her geisha, basically, was her right hand. Cut to 5 years later, my mom and my aunt are driving to Virginia to save grandma and bring her back home. So that's a real story. That's my family story. My grandmother is buried in the forest till today in Virginia, in the middle of nowhere. And my grandfather's last wish before he died was bring grandma bones back to Israel to a Jewish burial, which I didn't do yet, but I'm planning to do after this feature.
All right. So before we open this up, if you guys have any questions, we'll get to you in a minute. We'll have like a short Q&A. So we'll have a microphone going around. I wanted to ask you, was there an anecdote of someone that you met screening this movie this past year or before that about, just trying to get to know this topic better, you guys, what you do, some sort of meeting or an unexpected feedback that you came across?
Yeah.
Oh wait, can I know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're like a monster with two heads. um, I think one of the greatest moments, maybe the greatest moment for us, was the night before the Oscars. Our agents had their kind of annual Oscar party, and Spike Lee comes up to Guy and taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey man, I voted for you." And we were like, "Okay, we don't need to win. We won. That's it. Game over. We're good."
To hear that from an African American director who's such a symbol about the end of the short that is controversial, but has kind of a revenge tale in a way, and say to you, I got you. I know what it means. It means everything to me. So.
And he won his first Oscar that night.
Yeah.
For the screenplay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so if you guys have a question, just raise your hand, please. And we have a microphone for you.
Thank you for a great film. Two related questions.
Hi.
One, how did you go about casting these people? And number two, how do they feel about being cast in a rather unfavorable light?
Did you hear the question?
I think that it's an actor's dream to play an unfavorable character. That's like part of what makes acting so much fun. Danielle McDonald, who plays the mom, she was our dog sitter.
Before she became
True story.
Patty Cakes.
Before she became kind of a movie star, we fell so in love with her from the short that we cast her as the female lead in the feature. And the guy that plays the main guy also was Jonathan Tucker, also a very good friend of ours. He and his family. He's Jewish, from Boston.
Weizmeer.
But they're all actors. I mean, we had a wonderful casting director named Jessica Sherman, and every single person you see in this is an actor.
By the way, remember the monologue in the breakfast when
The
kid
snakes,
talked of the snake
snake,
monologue?
the little boy.
This is the monologue that the real kid, Jackson, gave in his school about his favorite pet. When I heard that, I thought that it has a kind of a double meaning and a metaphor to who we are, who they are, So I asked him to give that same monologue at breakfast.
I think I recognize the little kid from This Is Us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lonnie Chavez.
adorable.
Yeah.
Lonnie Chavez. By the way, the parents of those two kids, when they read the script, felt it's highly important for their kids to know what racism is because they're so sheltered in Hollywood and they didn't know, they were not exposed to that.
Well, when we offered it to Lonnie, to the little black kid, his mother called us. And we expected him to pass because he's kind of a big actor and he doesn't have that much dialogue in it. And we got a call from his mother, and she said, "Listen, my 9-year-old has no idea that he's black. He has no idea what racism is, and I'm gonna use my husband and I have decided we're gonna use this short film to teach him." And we have these amazing videos of him and Jackson like breakdancing together, and his mother, instead of reading him the script, they sat down and kind of as a bedtime story told him the story, and that's how she broke the news to him that the world is much more complicated than he knows.
Israel has a very vibrant and interesting and creative movie industry. Why come here? And is it different to make movies here than it is in Israel?
Great question. First of all, I fell in love with a beautiful woman. That's why I came to Los Angeles. But also, I've made films in Israel. I've made 3 features and short films. And I feel that in the States, you have a much wider variety of, first of all, budget-wise, and freedom to say or do whatever you want to do or say. I feel that in Israel right now, and my friends, my filmmaker friends, are having these difficulties. Not every subject that you want to tell or say is being approved, So there's kind of a problem about, like, they don't want war stories, or they don't want political stories, or they don't want, so it's like here every producer or any producer that you meet can tell you, I want to be involved in this and that. So there's place for everything, but it's also a budgetary question. Do I still want to scrape every shekel to make small films in Hebrew? Or do I want to do films in English with a wider budget and actors that I dream to work with? So in Harmonia, for instance, 3 months ago, I met with Penelope Cruz to portray the cult leader, So it's kind of like...
She said yes.
So it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go back to Israel to make films. I will, but I think I want both.
So apparently there's camaraderie amongst Oscar winners with Penelope.
Don't repeat that. No one's supposed to know that.
Stays in the room.
There's a journalist in the house. Hello.
Stays in the room.
Shh.
So I'm
Off the record.
if you don't mind, I'm here. I'm going to follow up a little bit and push you a little bit further with that question.
Where are you? Oh, hi.
Right here. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Racism in Israel is on the rise as well. It's very important that you dealt with it in your subject in the U.S. Do you know of any plans, or do you have any plans to sponsor or to help making art of this kind in Israel and help there as well?
Great question. Skin is an American film, but it's definitely a film about us as well. I think that the way that we treat Ethiopians, the fact that there's so much race, there's so much hatred and violence in Israel right now. They just came to me from Adler Chomsky, which is a advertising company, to do a campaign against racism, and I think I'm very positive about doing this. Directing a kind of a campaign about that, but I obviously do want to make films about that too. So if I find a topic or a script, or somebody will come and say, be involved, I will definitely do that. Again, I want to do Israeli films and American films. Yes.
Hi, I'm right next door. Thank you so much. I'm a Berkeley student studying film, so this was just amazing to watch.
Thank you.
You mentioned that with this film, they said racism's over. There's not really a need for this. So are there other political issues that you think are not being really explored in Hollywood right now, and what would you want to see more of?
Wow, such good questions. Very, very, very good question. Yeah, I mean, for sure, we have a project about what's happening at the Mexican border right now. with everyone. Did people see Roma here? With the lead Yalitza Aparicio, who was played the lead in Roma. She's going to star in it. We got the life rights. And it's going to be very interesting to see who puts their money behind it, because it's also not a necessarily sexy subject matter, but we don't care about that.
I grew up on films from the 70s, when you see Alice doesn't live here anymore. Taxi Driver, and films that studios put their money in films that are social and political. And that's what we want to do right now, because we have the mandate to do that and not go and do escapism and superhero movies. Our heroes are different. I didn't grow up on Spider-Man and Superman. I grew up on my grandfather, and my grandfather was my Superman, So that's why the story, that values that I want to bring to American features right now are more realistic in a way.
I think we have time for one last question.
Why more?
I think we need to vacate.
Hello. First of all, thank you again for that beautiful movie.
Thank you.
Beautiful is maybe a funny word. I had a question. Usually when you portray neo-Nazis and so on, you just see how bad that side of the education. And if I understood correctly, you also showed the young kid, the young African kid, also receiving an education that was negative in a different way, and which was very, very interesting to me. And how did you come up with that concept? Because that was so interesting to see, actually, if you continue the parallels between the obviously bad side and the other side, which initially you think is good, but comes out to be bad as well.
Well, the short is based on a sentence from the Torah that Avot achlu boser v'shinei banim tikena, which means our father ate bad fruits and the children's teeth will be rotten, which means whatever you teach your kids going to end up biting you in the ass. It's a kind of a cycle of violence. And, from either side, from either side. So I guess the two kids, for me, are the heroes of this short. And what we want to do, Sharon and I, we want to have another short that you meet those two kids 10 years from now. So the white kid coming out of prison and he meets the black kid and they don't even know that they are connected to what happened. So, it's just exploring the roots of evil and obviously the exposure to guns and gun control in this country. So, do you want to say anything else?
No, I think you're right that there's no winners in this movie. Everyone loses, and I actually think it's the opposite of the feature. The feature, as Guy said, it's not a perfect redemption story, but that this guy eventually comes out of this with a clean face. Whereas this is it's a much darker take on it, because Guy is asking, where does this ever end? So they're companion pieces in a way, but they're also each other's opposites.
But also the kind of a fascist, the racist side is human. So I'm showing him as a good father in a way. He's human. They have family life. He loves the pet. He loves this and that. So it's not black and white. So that's what was. Except it is, but yeah, I know. Nice one. But yeah, I think that I also saw the film The Downfall of Hitler, the Hirschbiegel film, and when you see Hitler, this monster, as human, which is crazy, but it worked, and I remember I saw it with my grandfather, and my grandfather was so shocked of saying we had this debate, yeah, so anyway.
Why are both named Skin?
Well, one is a guy who's learning what racism is on his own skin, and the other one is like a racist fascist who's taking hate off of his skin. So they're both visceral, physical skin, and metaphorically, it's just working. But it's my mistake, because in Israel,
Just to confuse everyone, that's why he did it.
in Israel, people thought that they're going to see the short again, and we had to explain that it's not the short, it's the feature. So it's my bad.
Do we have time for one last one?
אפשר עוד שאלה?
We'll do one last one. Okay.
Hi. First of all, thank you. It was really good.
Thank you.
So while this is not an Israeli film, this is something that a lot of Israelis do take like some sort of pride in because you are Israeli. And while racism is on the rise in Israel right now, it's not the same type of racism. It kind of comes off differently, in my opinion. Were you worried that like when Israelis watch it, they won't understand it as well as Americans?
They won't understand it. I think they understood it totally. I was not worried. I was worried that that I will get attacked by, I'm getting a lot of hate emails and hate messages from the right wing. They calling me the white hate,
The anti-white director, Guy Nativ.
the Jewish hate white, yeah. So, and from the left, by the way, from the extreme left, they tell me, why do I give a shit about a neo-Nazi? Why do I need to even forgive or So both ends are. I was just worried that that someone from the neo-Nazi fascist gang will come and try to do something, and find me. That's the only worry but people understand. They totally understand that.
So where can we watch Skin?
Skin the short is on a Fox Searchlight website.
YouTube, iTunes, it's all over the web. But the feature, sorry.
Go ahead. The feature.
The feature it was in theaters in July for however many weeks, but now it's on DirecTV, it's on Amazon Prime, it's on iTunes. You can get it anywhere. But make sure it's the feature with Jamie Bell and not the short.
Thank you very much. Oscar winners, Guy and Jamie.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David Casby.
Yay. Thank you very much, everyone.